Elias Vance was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He was simply a man who fixed things that were broken. For 15 years, he had served as a maintenance engineer aboard the Hegemony dreadnought, Eternal Compliance. He kept the lights running. He repaired broken pipes. He made sure the massive warship continued to float through the endless darkness of space. It was boring work, but it was safe work. And safety was all that mattered when you were human. The Galactic Hegemony had ruled the Orion Arm for 12,000 years. 47 species lived under their control. Some had joined willingly. Most had not. Humanity had surrendered 30 years ago, after the Hegemony burned 3 of their colony worlds to ash. The message was clear: submit or die. Humanity chose to submit. Now humans were client species. This was a polite way of saying they were slaves with extra steps. They could not own property. They could not hold command positions. They could not travel without permission. But they could live. They could breathe. They could exist. And for most humans, that was enough. Elias had told himself it was enough. He had a wife named Sarah and a daughter named Lily back on Earth. Every month, he sent them credits from his salary. Every year, he was allowed 1 video call. He lived for those calls. He lived for the sound of Lily's laughter and the warmth in Sarah's eyes. Everything else was just waiting. But on a cold night in the ship's artificial cycle, everything changed. Elias had been called to fix a ventilation problem in Section 7. This was a restricted area, medical personnel only. But the regular technician was sick, and the air recyclers were failing. The Valori officer who escorted him seemed nervous. The Valori were the ruling species of the Hegemony. They looked like giant insects, with too many eyes and minds that could touch your thoughts. This one kept clicking his mandibles and looking at Elias like he was a problem waiting to happen. The repair was simple: a clogged filter. Elias fixed it in 20 minutes. But when he was packing up his tools, he heard something. A sound that did not belong in a medical bay. A human sound. A moan of pain. He should have walked away. He knew this. Every survival instinct told him to pack his tools and leave. But Elias had a daughter. And that moan sounded young. Too young. He followed the sound through a door that should have been locked. His maintenance codes opened it anyway. The Hegemony never thought to restrict a repair worker's access. Why would they? Humans were harmless. Humans were broken. Humans knew their place. The room beyond the door was filled with glass pods. Hundreds of them. And inside each pod was a human body floating in blue liquid. Men, women, children. Their eyes were open, but empty. Wires ran from their skulls into the walls of the ship. Elias counted at least 300 pods in this room alone. And on the far wall, a display screen showed thousands more in other sections. He did not understand what he was seeing. Not at first. Then he found the control terminal. And his engineering mind did what it always did. It solved the problem. It found the answer. The Hegemony was not keeping these humans as prisoners. They were using them as computers. The neural patterns of human brains were being extracted and processed. Human minds were running the calculations for Hegemony warships. Every jump through faster than light space. Every targeting solution. Every navigation chart. All powered by stolen human thoughts. This was why humanity had been spared. Not mercy. Not politics. Resources. Humans were fuel. Elias stood very still for a long time. He thought about Sarah. He thought about Lily. He thought about every human on every world who believed that submission meant survival. They were wrong. They were all wrong. The Hegemony was not keeping humanity alive. They were harvesting humanity slowly, one mind at a time. He could walk away. He could pretend he never saw this. He could go back to fixing pipes and sending credits home and waiting for his yearly video call. He could be safe. But safety was a lie. It had always been a lie. Elias pulled out his datapad and began recording. He downloaded everything. Medical reports, harvesting schedules, shipping manifests showing humans transported from Earth and the colonies. Names, thousands of names. He copied it all to a secure data core and slipped it into his pocket. Then he did something stupid. Something brave. Something human. He walked to the ship's communication center and broadcast a fragment of the evidence on an open channel. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to make people ask questions. Enough to plant a seed of doubt. The alarms started screaming 30 seconds later. Elias ran. He had spent 15 years learning every corner of this ship. He knew shortcuts the officers had forgotten existed. He reached the shuttle bay before the security teams could lock it down. He climbed into a small reconnaissance vessel designed for scouting missions. It was fast. It was quiet. And it had a full fuel tank. The shuttle launched into space just as the Eternal Compliance began powering up its weapons. Elias pushed the engines to maximum and aimed for the nearest jump point. Behind him, the dreadnought fired. Plasma bolts streaked past his cockpit like angry stars. One struck his left engine. Warning lights filled the small cabin. But the shuttle kept moving. It reached the jump point. It vanished into faster-than-light travel. Elias emerged in a place called the Grave Nebula. It was a lawless region filled with dead planets and broken ships. Pirates lived here. Exiles hid here. The hegemony avoided it because there was nothing worth taking. It was perfect, but Elias knew this was only the beginning. He had stolen the hegemony's darkest secret. He had broadcast it across space. They would not let this stand. They would come for him with everything they had. He was right. 3 days later, High Arbiter Zeth Khan of the Valori stood before the Council of Arbiters. His many eyes burned with fury. His telepathic voice echoed in the minds of every council member. One human has stolen classified information. One human has threatened the stability of the hegemony. One human must be erased from existence. I am invoking Epsilon-class extermination protocol. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Epsilon-class was designed for destroying rebellious planets, not hunting individuals. How many ships? Asked an elder arbiter. 500, Zeth Khan replied. Every human who sees our response will understand. There is no escape. There is no hope. There is only compliance. And so the greatest hunt in galactic history began. 500 warships, thousands of soldiers, an entire armada mobilized to find one maintenance worker with a data core in his pocket. In the Grave Nebula, Elias Vance sat alone in his damaged shuttle. He looked at the data core in his hands. It contained the truth. It contained proof that could shake the foundations of the hegemony, but it was also his death sentence. He thought about Sarah. He thought about Lily. He thought about never seeing them again. Then he thought about the humans floating in those pods, the children with wires in their skulls, the thousands of names on those shipping manifests. Elias put the data core back in his pocket and began repairing his engine. They were sending 500 warships to hunt him. Good. Let them come. Let them chase him through this graveyard of stars. Let them learn what happened when they cornered a human with nothing left to lose. He had been an engineer. He had fixed broken things his entire life. Now, he was going to break something himself. And he was going to start with the hegemony's belief that humans could never fight back. 3 months had passed since Elias Vance disappeared into the Grave Nebula. Fleet Commander Torvax had expected to find him within a week. The human was alone. He had a damaged shuttle. He had no weapons, no supplies, no allies. Finding him should have been simple. It was not simple. Torvax was a Morath, a species made of living silicon. His people thought in pure logic. They calculated every possibility. They never made mistakes. But Torvax had made many mistakes since entering this cursed nebula, and his fleet was paying the price. 23 ships. That was how many he had lost so far. 23 vessels destroyed by traps, ambushes, and accidents that were not accidents at all. A hegemony cruiser had flown into an asteroid that somehow appeared on no scanner. A patrol squadron had docked at an abandoned station to investigate a distress signal, only to have the station explode around them. A supply ship had jumped to what should have been empty space and found itself inside a field of mines. The human was not hiding. He was hunting. Torvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Authority, and stared at the nebula's swirling clouds. Somewhere in that chaos of gas and debris, Elias Vance was watching, waiting, planning. "Sir," said his sensor officer, "we have located another human settlement, a small colony built into an asteroid. Approximately 200 life signs." Torvax felt something close to relief. Finally, a target. "Prepare boarding parties. We will take them alive. One of them will know where Vance is hiding." The assault was quick and brutal. Hegemony soldiers stormed the asteroid colony with stun weapons and shock grenades. They expected frightened refugees. They expected surrender. They found neither. The colonists fought back with mining tools and homemade explosives. Old men and young women threw themselves at armored soldiers. Children ran through tunnels carrying messages between defenders. The hegemony won, of course. They always won, but it took 6 hours and cost them over 100 soldiers. When the smoke cleared, Torvax personally interrogated the colony's leader. She was a human woman with gray hair and hard eyes. She had been a doctor on Earth before fleeing to the nebula 20 years ago. "Where is Elias Vance?" Torvax demanded. The woman laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "He is everywhere. He is nowhere. He is the ghost that will bury your fleet in this graveyard. You cannot win. You are 200 refugees against 500 warships. We do not need to win," the woman said. "We just need to make you bleed. Vance taught us that. Humans are very good at bleeding our enemies." Torvax ordered her execution, but her words stayed with him. Meanwhile, on a dead moon 3 light-years away, Elias Vance was teaching his newest recruits how to build a bomb from spare shuttle parts. There were 40 of them now, humans who had escaped the hegemony over the years, pirates who had nowhere else to go, former soldiers who had deserted rather than continue serving masters they hated. They were not an army. They were barely a crew. But they were angry, and Elias had learned that anger was a weapon sharper than any blade. "The hegemony fights with rules," Elias explained, holding up a crude explosive device. "They believe in formations and protocols and proper engagement distances. They think war is a game with winners and losers." He set the bomb down gently. "We are not playing their game. We are fighting for survival. And survival has no rules." A young man raised his hand. His name was Kofi, and he had escaped from a hegemony labor camp 6 months ago. "What if they catch us? What if they destroy us all?" Elias looked at him with tired eyes. "Then we make sure we take as many of them with us as possible. We make sure the cost of killing us is so high that every other species in this galaxy looks at the hegemony and thinks twice about obeying them." He walked to a window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Lily were waiting for him. He would probably never see them again. The thought was a knife in his chest that never stopped twisting. But the data core in his pocket was heavier than his grief. The truth had to survive. Even if he did not, over the next few weeks, Elias transformed the Grave Nebula into a nightmare. He rigged asteroids to explode when hegemony ships approached. He programmed derelict vessels to broadcast false signals and lead patrols into ambushes. He taught his followers how to move through the nebula like shadows, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The hegemony called it terrorism. Elias called it asymmetric warfare. His followers called it justice. One night, a hegemony patrol squadron entered a debris field searching for the human base. There were 12 ships. Only one survived to report what happened. The transmission reached Torvax's flagship at midnight. The surviving captain was a young Valori, and his voice shook with fear. "They were everywhere, Commander. They came from inside the debris. Ships we thought were dead. They hit us from all sides. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like animals, like things that wanted to survive more than they wanted to live." Torvax listened to the transmission 3 times. Then he locked himself in his quarters and tried to understand what he was facing. The hegemony had conquered 1,000 species. They had crushed rebellions and burned planets. They were the greatest military force in galactic history. And yet one human engineer was making them look like fools. How? The answer came to him slowly. The hegemony fought to win. Humans fought because they had no other choice. There was a difference. A dangerous difference. His thoughts were interrupted by a chime from his personal communication device. Private channel. Encrypted. Impossible to trace. A human voice filled the room. Calm, almost friendly. "Commander Torvax, my name is Elias Vance. I wanted to introduce myself properly." Torvax froze. "How did you access this channel?" "I spent 15 years maintaining hegemony ships. I know every system, every weakness, every back door your engineers forgot to close." A pause. "You have lost 47 ships now. I have been counting. I wonder, at what number do your masters start questioning whether you are hunting me, or I am hunting you? You cannot win this war." "Probably not," Vance admitted. "But I can make you lose it. I can make the cost of catching me so high that every species under hegemony control starts asking questions. I can turn your hunt into a symbol of everything wrong with your empire. And then what? You will still be dead." "Yes," Vance said softly. "But the truth will be alive. And truth is harder to kill than any man. The communication ended. Torvax sat in the darkness for a long time. He was beginning to understand something terrible. The hegemony had not sent him to hunt a fugitive. They had sent him to fight something far worse. They had sent him to fight hope. And hope, Torvax realized, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. You could not shoot it. You could not bomb it. You could not track it on sensors or destroy it with warships. You could only watch it spread. In the Grave Nebula, Elias Vance looked at his small fleet of damaged ships and exhausted fighters. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. They had no real chance of survival, but they were still alive. They were still fighting. And every day they survived, the legend grew. The ghost of the Grave Nebula. The human who would not die. The man who made the hegemony send 500 ships to catch a single fugitive. Elias smiled grimly. It was not much of a smile, but it was enough. The hunt continued, and so did the hunter. 6 months into the hunt, High Arbiter Zeth Khan decided that Commander Torvax had failed. The fleet had lost 69 ships. The human was still alive. Worse, he was becoming a legend. Stories were spreading across the galaxy. A single human defying the greatest military force in history. An engineer turned warrior. A ghost that could not be killed. The hegemony tried to suppress the stories, but they spread anyway. They spread because people wanted to believe them. Zeth Khan knew that legends were dangerous. Legends inspired rebellion. Legends made the impossible seem possible. This human had to die, and he had to die publicly. The galaxy needed to see that no one escaped the hegemony, so the High Arbiter took personal command of the hunt. He traveled to the Grave Nebula aboard his flagship, the Absolute Truth, and he brought weapons that Commander Torvax did not have. The Thoughtseers arrived on a black ship with no markings. There were 7 of them, all Valori, all ancient. Their minds had been trained for centuries to reach across space and touch the thoughts of any living being. No one had ever hidden from a Thoughtseer. No one could. Zeth Khan gathered them in his throne room and gave them their mission. Find the human called Elias Vance. Find him, and tell me exactly where he is hiding. The Thoughtseers sat in a circle and closed their many eyes. Their consciousness expanded outward like ripples in water. They touched the minds of pirates and refugees. They felt the fear and anger of the nebula's inhabitants. They searched for the unique pattern of Elias Vance's thoughts, and they found something strange. His mind is broken, reported the eldest Thoughtseer. Not damaged. Broken deliberately. He has divided himself into pieces. When we reach for one piece, it slips away, and another appears. It is like trying to catch smoke. Zeth Khan's mandibles clicked with frustration. How is this possible? Human minds are different. They respond to trauma by fragmenting. This one has turned that response into a defense. He has shattered himself so completely that we cannot get a clear reading. The Thoughtseer paused. I do not think he did this consciously. I think his suffering did it for him. The High Arbiter dismissed them and sat alone in his throne room. He had underestimated the humans. Everyone had underestimated the humans. Their weakness was their strength. Their fragility was their armor. The very things that made them easy to break also made them impossible to catch. Meanwhile, in a hidden base on the dark side of a frozen moon, Elias was planning something bold. His fleet had grown to 40 ships now. Most were damaged. All were outgunned. But they were enough for what he had in mind. The hegemony communication relay at Station Keth 4, Elias said, pointing at a holographic map. It connects the Grave Nebula to the rest of the galaxy. Every message from the hunt passes through it. Every order from High Command. Every report back to the hegemony core worlds. His second-in-command, a woman named Dara Chen, studied the map with worried eyes. She had been a pilot before the hegemony killed her family. Now she was the closest thing Elias had to a friend. That station is heavily defended, she said. We would lose half our ships taking it. We are not taking it. We are using it. Elias pulled out the data core that had started everything. 6 months ago, I broadcast a fragment of the truth. A hint. A question. Now I am going to broadcast everything. Every file. Every name. Every piece of evidence showing what the hegemony does to humans. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. The truth would spread across the galaxy, like fire. It would reach every species, every world, every corner of hegemony space. There would be no more hiding, no more secrets, and the hegemony would respond with everything they had. The raid on Station Keth 4 happened 3 days later. It was fast and brutal. Elias led the assault personally, flying a captured hegemony fighter into the station's defense grid. His pilots followed in a wave of mismatched ships held together by hope and welding tape. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Elias lost 9 ships and over 200 people. But they took the station. They held it long enough for Elias to connect his data core to the communication array and upload everything. The truth went out on every channel, every frequency, every network. It reached the core worlds and the outer colonies. It reached the Council of Arbiters and the slave markets of the Rim. It reached billions of beings who had always suspected the hegemony was evil, but had never known just how evil. The evidence was undeniable. Videos of humans in harvesting pods, medical reports describing neural extraction procedures, shipping manifests with names and dates. Children. There were children in those pods. The galaxy erupted. Protests broke out on 100 worlds. Client species demanded answers. Even some hegemony citizens began asking uncomfortable questions. The Council of Arbiters called an emergency session and declared the evidence a sophisticated fabrication. No one believed them. Elias should have felt triumphant. He had done what he set out to do. The truth was free. But 3 days after the broadcast, a message arrived on his personal channel. It was from High Arbiter Zeth Khan. You have caused me great trouble, human. You have embarrassed the hegemony before the galaxy. But did you really think there would be no consequences? A video file was attached. Elias opened it with shaking hands. It showed a public square on Earth, a crowd of humans forced to watch. And on a platform in the center, 2 figures in chains. Sarah, Lily, his wife, his daughter. The execution was quick, professional, painless, according to the commentary. A mercy, they called it. A mercy for the family of a traitor. Elias watched the video once. Then he turned off his screen and sat in darkness. Dara found him 3 days later. He had not eaten. He had not slept. He had not spoken to anyone. He just sat there, staring at nothing, the data core clutched in his hand like a dead thing. Elias, she said softly. The fleet needs you. The people need you. We cannot stop now. Why not? His voice was hollow, empty. The truth is out. That was the mission. Let someone else carry it forward. Because you started something. You showed the galaxy that one person could fight back. If you stop now, that message dies. All those people who died helping you, they died for nothing. Elias looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I was fighting to expose the hegemony. I thought if people knew the truth, they would care. They would act. He laughed bitterly. The truth has been out for 3 days. The protests are already fading. The galaxy knows what the hegemony does to humans, and they are going back to their lives. They do not care enough to change anything. Dara sat beside him. Then make them care. Make them unable to look away. You wanted to be a messenger. Fine. The message was delivered. Now be something else. What? A consequence. Show the galaxy what happens when you push a human too far. Show them that the hegemony is not untouchable. Show them that monsters can bleed. Elias sat in silence for a long time. He thought about Sarah's smile. He thought about Lily's laughter. He thought about all the things he would never have again. Then he thought about the hegemony. About Zeth Khan. About the creature who had murdered his family to send a message. Slowly, something changed in his eyes. The emptiness filled with something darker, colder, something that looked a lot like purpose. Bring me the fleet commanders, he said. We are not running anymore. What are we doing instead? Elias stood up. His body was tired. His heart was broken. But his mind was clear for the first time in months. We are attacking. We are going to hurt them so badly that the galaxy will never forget. We are going to make them afraid of humans. Not because we can win, because they will learn that beating us costs more than it is worth. Dara smiled grimly. That sounds like revenge. No, Elias said. Revenge is personal. This is education. He walked out of the room with the data core in his pocket and fire in his chest. Behind him, the war was about to change. The hegemony had taken everything from him. Now he was going to take something from them. He was going to take their belief that they were safe. 8 months into the hunt, the hegemony armada was no longer hunting. It was surviving. Commander Torvax had been relieved of command after the disaster at Station Keth 4. High Arbiter Zeth Khan led the fleet personally now. coordinating from his massive flagship. He had started with 500 warships. He now had 289. The rest were debris floating in the Grave Nebula, and Elias Vance was responsible for almost all of it. The human had changed. Before the death of his family, he had been a reluctant warrior. He fought to survive. He fought to spread the truth. He took no pleasure in killing. After the execution broadcast, something inside him had turned cold. Efficient, merciless, he still did not enjoy killing. But he no longer hesitated either. Zeth Khan stood on the bridge of the absolute truth and studied the tactical display. Red markers showed the position of his remaining ships. Blue markers showed probable enemy locations. The blue markers kept moving. They were never where the sensors said they should be. "Report," he demanded. His tactical officer, a nervous young Valori, swallowed hard. 3 more ships lost overnight. High Arbiter. The cruiser, Eternal Flame, was destroyed by a mine that should not have existed. The patrol vessels Righteous Fury and Silent Judgment were ambushed while investigating a distress signal. No survivors. How does he keep finding our ships? We do not know, High Arbiter. The human seems to know our patrol routes before we do. He knows our communication codes. He knows where we will be, and when we will be there. Zeth Khan's many eyes narrowed. We have a spy. That is the most likely explanation, yes. The High Arbiter turned away from the display. Somewhere in his fleet, someone was feeding information to the enemy. Someone was betraying the hegemony. The thought made his blood boil. He did not know that the spy was not a person. It was a program. Elias had spent 15 years learning hegemony computer systems. He had left back doors in every ship he ever repaired. Now those back doors were open, and he was listening to everything. 300 light-years away, Elias sat in the command center of his hidden base and watched the hegemony fleet through their own sensors. He knew every ship's position. He knew their fuel levels and ammunition counts. He knew which captains were loyal and which were beginning to doubt. Information was a weapon, and Elias used it like a blade. His fleet had shrunk to 31 ships after the Station Keth 4 raid, but his influence had grown far beyond those ships. The truth broadcast had reached other species, races that had been conquered by the hegemony, races that remembered what freedom felt like. The Kreth were the first to make contact. They had been a warrior species once, proud and fierce. The hegemony had broken them centuries ago, taken their weapons, and turned them into laborers, but they had not forgotten how to fight. A Kreth elder appeared on Elias's communication screen. His scaled face was old and scarred. His eyes burned with ancient anger. "We saw your broadcast, human. We saw what the hegemony does to your people. They do similar things to ours. Not harvesting, sterilization. They are slowly erasing us from existence." Elias listened without expression. "What do you want? To remember what we were? Our battle barges are hidden in asteroid fields across the sector. We have kept them secret for generations, waiting for the right moment." The elder paused. "Perhaps this is the moment." Similar messages came from other species. The Solari, gentle pacifists who had watched their world burn for refusing to fight. The Morvac, engineers whose technology had been stolen and claimed by the hegemony. The Zalith, whose children were taken as servants for hegemony nobles. The rebellion was not just human anymore, but Elias knew that hope alone would not win this war. The hegemony was still stronger. They had more ships, more weapons, more everything. If this became a traditional war, the rebellion would lose. So Elias refused to fight a traditional war. He introduced the hegemony to concepts they had never encountered: psychological warfare, misinformation, terror tactics. He spread rumors through the fleet that made soldiers afraid to sleep. He leaked fake orders that contradicted the chain of command. He sent messages to ship captains, suggesting their commanders were planning to blame them for failures. Trust collapsed. Morale crumbled. Ships that should have been coordinating began watching each other with suspicion. Dara Chen observed this with a mixture of admiration and unease. She found Elias alone one night, staring at tactical displays in the darkness. "You are destroying them," she said. "Not with weapons. With fear. Fear is more effective than weapons. A weapon can only kill you. Fear makes you destroy yourself." "Is this still about the truth? About justice?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know anymore. Maybe it was never about justice. Maybe I just wanted to hurt them as badly as they hurt me." He turned to look at her. "Does that make me a monster? Dara sat beside him. It makes you human. We are not saints. We are not heroes. We are just people who refuse to die quietly. A week later, something unexpected happened. A hegemony cruiser called the Binding Law broke formation and jumped to neutral space. Its captain transmitted a message on an open channel. This is Captain Eurus of the Binding Law. I am Silari. I have served the hegemony for 50 years. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself that obedience meant survival. Her voice trembled. Then I saw the human broadcast. I saw what the hegemony does to the innocent, and I realized that survival without honor is not survival at all. It is slow death. She paused. I am defecting. 12 ships are following me. We wish to join the human resistance. Elias watched the transmission with something close to wonder. A hegemony captain. A 50-year veteran. Turning against everything she had served. Hope was spreading. And hope, as he had learned, was contagious. The Battle of Carrion Station happened 1 month later. It was the largest engagement of the war. Zeth Khan had finally cornered Elias's fleet near an abandoned space station at the edge of the nebula. The hegemony brought 170 ships. Elias had 43, including Captain Eurus's defectors. The battle lasted 9 hours. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was the most violent thing Elias had ever experienced. The humans and their allies fought like nothing the hegemony had ever seen. They rammed ships when their weapons failed. They boarded enemy vessels and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. They refused to surrender even when surrounded and outnumbered. 87 hegemony ships were destroyed or disabled. The rebellion lost 32. Among the dead was Dara Chen. Elias found her body in the wreckage of a corridor she had been defending. The enemy had tried to reach the command center. Dara had stopped them. Alone. With a pistol and a welding torch. She had killed 14 soldiers before they finally brought her down. Elias knelt beside her and closed her eyes. He did not cry. He had no tears left. But something inside him hardened even further. Another piece of his humanity, burned away by grief. He carried her body to the shuttle bay and laid her next to the other fallen. There were too many. There were always too many. But then a message arrived from the Kreeth homeworld. One sentence. One promise. We remember what we were. We are coming. Similar messages followed from a dozen other worlds. The Silari, the Morvac, the Zalith. Ships were launching. Fleets were forming. The rebellion that had started with one man and a stolen data core was becoming something larger. Elias stood on the bridge of his battered flagship and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was regrouping. Zeth Khan was planning his next move. The final battle was coming. He thought about everyone he had lost. Sarah, Lily, Dara, hundreds of others whose names he would carry forever. I did not ask for this, he whispered to the darkness. I did not want to be a leader. I did not want to be a symbol. I just wanted to fix things. But sometimes fixing things meant breaking other things first. Sometimes the only way to build something new was to burn down the old. Elias turned away from the window and walked to the command center. There was a war to win. There were monsters to kill. There was a galaxy to wake up, and he was not alone anymore. The final month of the war began with fire in the sky. Kreeth battle barges emerged from asteroid fields, where they had been hidden for 3 centuries. Each ship was massive, covered in ancient weapons that the hegemony had thought destroyed long ago. The Kreeth crews were old and young, warriors who had trained in secret for generations, waiting for this moment. Silari civilian transports formed blockades around hegemony supply routes. They carried no weapons. They simply sat in space, daring the hegemony to fire on unarmed vessels. When hegemony commanders hesitated, the supplies stopped flowing. When they did fire, the images spread across the galaxy, turning more species against them. Even within hegemony space, cracks were spreading. 2 of the 47 member species announced they were withdrawing from the coalition. A third expelled all Valori officials from their territory. The empire that had ruled for 12,000 years was crumbling from within. High Arbiter Zeth Khan watched it all from the bridge of the absolute truth. His fleet had been reduced to 112 ships. His authority was questioned in council sessions. His name had become associated with failure. All because of one human. Zeth Khan had studied Elias Vance obsessively over the past months. He had read every file, watched every recording, analyzed every decision. He was trying to understand how a simple engineer had become the most dangerous being in the galaxy. The answer, he realized, was that Vance had nothing to lose. The hegemony had taken everything from him: his freedom, his family, his future. They had stripped him down to nothing but purpose, and a being with nothing but purpose was impossible to stop. But even purpose had limits. Even legends could die. Zeth Khan gathered his remaining fleet around the absolute truth and broadcast a message to the rebellion. Elias Vance, you have caused great damage to the hegemony. You have inspired others to follow your foolish rebellion. But all things end. Face me in open battle, and I will grant mercy to your followers. Continue to hide, and I will burn every world that has sheltered you. The choice is yours. The message reached Elias in his command center. He was surrounded by allies now: Kreth warriors, Silari diplomats, human fighters who had followed him through hell. They all waited for his response. "It is a trap," said Captain Eurus. "He wants to draw us out, to destroy us in one battle." "Probably," Elias agreed. "But he is also desperate. His fleet is scattered. His authority is failing. If we do not face him now, he will do exactly what he threatened. He will burn worlds. He will kill millions, just to prove he still has power. So what do we do?" Elias looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet was clustered around the absolute truth, a ship so large it was practically a small moon. It carried enough weapons to devastate planets. It was the symbol of hegemony power. "We give him what he wants," Elias said. "A final battle, but not the kind he expects." The plan was simple and insane. The rebellion fleet would engage the hegemony directly, drawing their attention and fire. Meanwhile, Elias would lead a small team aboard the absolute truth itself. Not to capture it, not to disable it, to reach Zeth Khan personally. "You cannot be serious," Captain Eurus said. "That ship has thousands of soldiers, dozens of security checkpoints. You would die before you reached the second corridor." "Maybe. But Zeth Khan is the head of the snake. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The hegemony is held together by fear. Kill the High Arbiter in his own throne room, and that fear breaks." "And if you fail?" Elias smiled grimly. "Then I die doing something that matters. That is more than most people get." The Battle of the Absolute Truth began at dawn, as measured by the flagship's artificial day cycle. 300 rebel ships faced 112 hegemony vessels. The numbers had finally shifted, but numbers did not tell the whole story. The hegemony ships were larger, better armed, crewed by professional soldiers. The rebels were a mixture of everything: old warships, converted freighters, mining vessels with weapons welded to their hulls. They fought anyway. The space around the absolute truth turned into chaos. Ships exploded in balls of fire. Fighters danced between massive cruisers. Boarding pods launched in all directions. It was the largest naval battle in centuries, and it was happening because of one man's stolen data core. While the battle raged, Elias guided a small shuttle toward the Absolute Truth's maintenance bay. He had 20 volunteers with him. Humans, mostly. A few Kreth warriors. One Silari pilot who had lost her entire family to hegemony cleansing. They breached the hull through an emergency airlock. They moved through corridors using maintenance tunnels that Elias had memorized from stolen blueprints. They killed quietly when they had to. They hid when they could not. Zeth Khan's throne room was at the heart of the ship. It took them 3 hours to reach it. They lost 8 people along the way. Each death was another weight on Elias's soul, another name to carry. The throne room doors were massive, carved with symbols of hegemony authority. 2 elite guards stood before them, Kreth warriors. Elias stepped forward before the Kreth could attack. He held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. "You know who I am," he said. "You know what I have done. The hegemony calls me a terrorist. Your people call me a liberator. I am neither. I am just a man who saw something evil and could not look away." The Kreth guards stared at him with ancient eyes. One of them slowly lowered his weapon. "We have waited 300 years, the guard said, waiting for someone to remind us what we were. Perhaps you are that reminder." He stepped aside. "The Arbiter is inside. May your courage match your legend." Elias walked through the doors into the throne room. It was vast, filled with holographic displays showing the battle outside. And at the center, on a throne of black metal, sat Zeth Khan. The High Arbiter was enormous, even for a Valori. His carapace was covered in ceremonial armor. His many eyes glowed with psychic energy. He looked at Elias like a god examining an insect. "So the ghost finally appears," Zeth Khan said. "I expected someone larger. I expected someone smarter," Elias replied. "You had 500 ships. You had the entire hegemony behind you. And you could not catch one engineer." Zeth Khan rose from his throne. His mind pressed against Elias's consciousness, trying to break through the fragmented defenses. He found nothing but cold purpose and endless grief. "You are empty," the Arbiter said. "There is nothing left inside you but hatred. You made me this way. You killed my wife. You killed my daughter. You turned me into exactly what you feared." Elias pulled a small device from his jacket. A power cell. Modified. Unstable. Enough energy to level half the ship, and now we both pay the price. Zeth Khan's eyes widened. "You would die just to kill me?" "I was dead the moment I saw those pods. The moment I understood what you were doing to my people. Everything since then has been borrowed time." Elias smiled. It was not a kind smile. But borrowed time is enough. It is enough to spread the truth. It is enough to start a fire. And fires, once started, are very hard to stop. He pressed the activation switch. The explosion tore through the throne room and spread outward. It destroyed the command center. It crippled the ship's main systems. It killed High Arbiter Zeth Khan, ruler of the hegemony, master of 47 species, commander of 1,000 fleets. And it killed Elias Vance, maintenance engineer, father, husband, accidental, revolutionary. The absolute truth went dark. The hegemony fleet, suddenly leaderless, fell into confusion. Rebel ships pressed their advantage. Within hours, the battle was over. Within days, the news had spread across the galaxy. The High Arbiter was dead. The hegemony was broken. And a human had done it. The war did not end that day. The hegemony was vast, and its collapse took years. There were more battles, more deaths, more sacrifices. But something fundamental had changed. Species that had been afraid were no longer afraid. Worlds that had been silent began to speak. On Earth, a monument was built in a public square. It showed a man holding a data core, looking up at the stars. The plaque beneath it read simply, "Elias Vance. He ran, so we could rise." Children would visit the monument on school trips. They would ask their teachers who he was, and the teachers would tell them the story of a man who was not a soldier, not a hero, just an engineer who saw something wrong and decided to fix it. One teacher, a woman with kind eyes and gray in her hair, would add something else. He taught us something important. The hegemony ruled because everyone believed they were too strong to fight. Vance showed us that strength is not just about ships and weapons. It is about will. It is about refusing to accept that things cannot change. She would look up at the statue and smile sadly. He was just one person. But one person, in the right place, at the right time, can change everything. In orbit above Earth, the first human-built warship rolled off the construction line. It was not the largest ship in the new coalition fleet. It was not the most powerful, but it was a symbol, proof that humanity had learned from its pain and emerged stronger. Its name was painted on the hull in letters visible from space. The Unseen. And across the galaxy, whenever tyrants rose and threatened the innocent, whenever empires believed they were too mighty to fall, people would remember the story of Elias Vance. They would remember the man who ran until he could not run anymore, then turned around and fought until there was nothing left. They would remember, and they would not be afraid, because humans had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Never corner something that has nothing left to lose. Never hunt what is willing to become the hunter. And never, ever, underestimate the fury of someone fighting for something larger than themselves. The fire that Elias started never truly went out. It just kept spreading, from star to star, from world to world, until the whole galaxy burned bright.